Hi guys, my name is Grzegorz Róg and I'm a designer. So as you can see, I can code just as well, but no, just kidding. This conference, I thought it will recall me one of the biggest technology conferences I spoke on. It was Microsoft Technology Summit, and there were about 3,000 developers watching me going up the stage and opening my MacBook. So you should have seen their faces, right? But nowadays, I figured out that you guys developers also are much closer to design, and you also use Macs, so at least some of you. But still, we are quite different, so I think that's a good thing. And different makes us complete, and there's great and useful debate about difference and inclusion in design and IT. And there's also a great valuable difference in the mindset of both designers and developers. What glues it together is respect. Because our team is capable to do some amazing things, but in order to do them even better, we need to learn a bit more about each other's workflows. And I'm a great evangelist of designers learning how to code, not to take away your jobs, but to better understand what's real in the project. And also, I love you to see a bit of a design process that lets you better understand how we struggle as designers. Right now, I'm redesigning eduweb.pl, which you might know. It's a platform with video courses on different topics. So it's also for developers like you with Angular courses, but many different topics. So I'd like to show you a quick overview of the UI of eduweb, of my work, and it will serve as a case study of a process that I'm about to bring in the next slides. So let's bring it on. And there's no music. So I'm going to do like guitar and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. It should be there, but it's not going through HDMI. So sorry guys. It was something like that. Oh! Can you just bring me a real guitar, okay? So yeah, that's it. And let me explain the process behind such a project from designer's point of view. And let me bring up some technical side and also tools that we use. So while creating this UI, I used Sketch and Figma. Sketch is only macOS. So there is also Figma, which is really great. Maybe not as refined as Sketch, but it has one great advantage. Actually, it's available directly in the browser, so it's multi-platform. And it's also free for some basic use. So the great thing about modern design tools like Sketch is that you can create components that are called symbols in Sketch, and they are reusable as instances across the design. So it means that when I change the button in the symbol library, it gets updated across the entire project, okay? Like everywhere. And I'm adding those new elements step by step until I create something that's called a style guide, okay? So the style guide contains colors, typography, and symbols such as buttons and form elements, and it will let me keep it consistent on all the pages in my application, okay? For a start, this library that I create is created locally within the initial design file, but then, depending on the tool, it can become a public, theme library or just a separate sketch file acting as a fundament for all my other files. So this boils down to some file organization that I want to mention. And as you guys use GitHub for versioning and collaboration, the equivalent for designers using Sketch is abstract. In abstract, I can create branches and I can version control my design files. And as well as I can keep like this one file that I mentioned, this style guide, as a universal library component library with the whole project. And it's as easy as linking this one library to all of the branches that I have. And then I can use the colors, the buttons, and stuff like this in my design, in all of my design files. So if I update this library, everything gets updated accordingly. So this gets even easier for Figma because there is no need for this additional abstract layer, and versioning is embedded into the tool. Keeping it that way means making sure that this 50 shades of gray never occurs in the project. They shouldn't, okay? But one other thing, is that we keep the structure and components consistent. But on the other hand, it's worth to bring up the fundamental difference in thinking. With developers tend to think systems, and designers tend to think layouts. Okay, and this is actually quite a big difference because systems are those design files with components I showed you. And that's a great start for front-end developer. But designer just can't start this way. It's impossible for me as a designer to create all the buttons and forms and colors and stuff, and then try to glue this together to form like a Frankenstein page or something like this. So this is why designers have to think page layout first and work with the positioning, the white space of the elements, the sizes, the margins, and then we extract those elements from the layouts and create a style guide. So this is why creating a style guide is like ongoing process, and depending on when you enter as front-end developer, it might not be mature enough or it might not be ready yet, okay? So please be understanding. And another great way we can help one another is to create and connect real data into the design files, at least if there is any, okay? So in Sketch, I can use a plugin called Craft, and I can easily bring real data into my project via an API, a JSON file, something like this. Then I can reuse it automatically. So all the data fills into those duplicated design elements. I'm going to show you that in a sec, okay? So I can duplicate the elements, and then I have different things from JSON being loaded into the proper fields. So I don't use any lorem ipsum or stuff like this. It shouldn't be that way. When the design is ready, we can just proceed to the handoff, which means passing the design specs to you guys, to developers. So you obviously know the bitmap and vector thing. Well, there's only one rule. Just don't ever use bitmaps. Okay, it's easy. Well, the only one exception is photos, right? Like cameras don't capture vectors just yet, okay? But in the UI I've shown you, there's no single bitmap file. So this is all vector. And whether you recreate those elements in CSS or using the SVG, it's really up to you. It just don't trust designers on this. They don't really know which way might be better. So, and I think it's okay. If you have to export an asset yourself and you have the software, don't be afraid to do it, okay? It's very simple. The one and only rule that I want to point out is the elements need to be grouped together and they need to form a single asset that you export. So this little bounding box that you see should be exactly the size of the asset and you're good to go. Otherwise, you'll end up tweaking some strange margin things and positions and size differences. So then you just select the element and you export it as SVG, so it's as easy as that. The only software it looks a bit different in is Illustrator, and my recommendation is to export each individual asset as an artboard, if you know the concept, but it's pretty straightforward as well. Just before you do it, make sure you select the thing you want to export, and then there is an option in Illustrator that lets you select this object and artboard and fit the artboard to the object. Again, making sure that you have a perfect sized asset. Otherwise, you have the differences in coordinates, okay? So then you can go ahead and export this as SVG as well. So it's pretty easy, and it works in all the software like that. So that being said, doing this that way is an exception. You shouldn't do it. Neither the designer. Because there are great tools such as Zeppelin and Avocode or Sketch Measure that will let you hand off the layouts so much better, okay? And all designer has to do in order to prepare the assets to export in Zeppelin, for example, is to select the asset and make it exportable. So let me go back for a sec. Make it exportable, and then, this video doesn't work, but still, you can then check the measures and you can check all the screens in Zeppelin and you can extract the asset yourself. So you can select any asset, you can check the pixels, the percentages, and you can also go to the exact graphic asset that you need, and then export it as SVG. And you're basically ready to go. You can also copy the text and stuff like this. So now I mentioned the states that are quite obvious, and there are also elements of design. So states can be hover, valid, or responsive, but depending on the number of elements, at least where it's necessary, designer should deliver screens with no results, a few results, or a lot of them. So the easy example are search screens. And in this case, it's usually enough to create a separate screen with the name like search, no results, but sometimes it's a bit less obvious, okay? So especially if you have elements of UI changing positions or some user interactions, it can be done in software like InVision, where you can easily mock up the transitions between the elements and you can show the developer how it should be done, okay? So it's very straightforward. Then you can, from Sketch, it's just 2 clicks to export it. And then it brings us closer to animation. So right now, this kind of workflow kind of sucks because there's no really good tool to create and export prototype animations that can actually be used in real scenario. Well, Framer X is close to this, but it's still kind of a promise, but it's still worth checking out. And designers can use tools such as Flinto or Principle or even After Effects to prototype animations, but they end up doing something like this, okay, which is like unreal for the design, for the development itself. So you still have to throw it away. And the way I think of it is oftentimes I check the existing examples, for example, on CodePen, and then in Flinto, I recreate these animations with the proper timing and stuff like this to set this right and show the developer what I mean. Well, this kind of concludes the good modern practices, but the world is not ideal, and design is a cyclic process. So there are times where design iterations lead to something that's, design going out of sync with development. And the way we try to handle this are design systems, sometimes even design languages. And the ultimate goal is to have a living design system of code components linked to the design tool so that you can update production with maybe some single clicks from a design tool. And it's possible. So it can get synced with Figma, for example. And let me show you this approach from scratch. So first step is building a style guide where you have all the text styles and colors and reusable components, and you have all the atoms, okay? Then you create and organize everything into some component libraries that you can share across the team. And finally, what we've done is we've taken the Figma API to bring the code from this design file, and it was 200,000 lines for my style guide, but we started from scratch, and I've shown everything to the developer that just tried to glue this together and transform this Figma file into actual CSS and HTML code. And then this finally led to like this automatic web version of the style guide with all the components, the reusable code, and also different states displayed just depending on the naming convention of the component. This is still work in progress, but it can be done. It's linked from the design tool, which is Figma, to like a living system. And you can do it with Angular. You can export HTML and maybe Sass from design files with Figma API. And then you can create such a living design system. Well, it's possible that not everyone works this way, and there might still be folks using Photoshop files and sending them over, and for multiple valid reasons. But what I've shown you here is also a way of educating you, but also designers, a bit about the process, and hopefully you get better understanding of the things that we are involved in. So please keep in mind that it's like this mutual respect, and is the thing that brings us all together. And together we can also create these amazing modern interfaces. So, okay, it's already 14 minutes, so it's a bit, there you can learn more about myself, and also you can educate a bit your fellow designers on the design process that I've shown you. It was just to inspire you in kind of way of what can be done. And also finishing my presentation, I'd like to invite you to, at least of those of you who are Polish, to the private beta of the new platform I've shown you. Like the platform I told you about is to serve people like you getting knowledge like this and also some other stuff. And I'd be honored if you can join like the movement to change the education in design, in both design and development, because I think it's pretty important for now. So here you have it. Goodbye world, and thank you for your attention. Thanks a lot.